What if I told you that Iran, known in ancient times as Persia, plays a much bigger role in biblical prophecy than most people realize? While we usually hear about Israel, Egypt, and Babylon in biblical history, Persia, modern-day Iran, wasn't just another empire. In fact, it was a nation uniquely chosen to fulfill critical prophecies, impacting the destiny of God's chosen people, Israel. The biblical references to Persia reveal how this ancient civilization was involved in events that changed the course of history. In today's video, we'll uncover how Iran's place in the Bible goes deeper than we might expect, revealing how this nation was woven into some of the Bible's most pivotal moments. The story of Iran's origins, according to the Bible, begins soon after the Great Flood, with the descendants of Noah. The Bible tells us that all nations descended from Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Through Japheth's lineage came a descendant named Madai, who is recognized as the forefather of the Medes. The Medes, along with the Persians, became key players in shaping the ancient Middle East, and they eventually formed the Medo-Persian Empire, which went on to dominate the region. This connection between Japheth, Madai, and the Medes ties the Iranian people into one of the Bible's earliest genealogies, making them a part of the divine timeline that God set forth in the Old Testament. According to Genesis 10, Japheth's descendants spread out across a region that encompassed the area we now know as Iran, rooting the Iranian people in biblical history right from the beginning of post-flood civilization. Fast forward several generations, and the Medes and Persians have grown into powerful societies, eventually merging under a powerful leader, Cyrus the Great. By joining forces, these two groups laid the foundation for one of the greatest empires of the ancient world, the Persian Empire. This empire stretched across an area that included many places crucial to the biblical narrative, such as Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. But more importantly, Persia's significance goes beyond its military conquests and territories. In an extraordinary turn of events, God used Persia to accomplish His promises to the people of Israel. To understand the significance of Persia in biblical prophecy, we need to first look back to the Babylonian captivity. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled the people of Judah to Babylon. This captivity lasted 70 years, just as the prophet Jeremiah had foretold. During this period, the Israelites lived as exiles in Babylon, separated from their homeland and the temple, which was the center of their religious life. Then, in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great entered the scene, conquering Babylon in a swift military campaign. What happened next would change the course of history for the Jewish people. The book of Ezra opens with a remarkable decree from Cyrus, who not only allowed the Israelites to return to their land but also gave them permission to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This decree is recorded in Ezra 1 verses 1-4, where Cyrus proclaims, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and He has appointed me to build a temple for Him at Jerusalem in Judah." In this decree, Cyrus acknowledges that the God of Israel had a specific purpose for him, to restore the Israelites and their temple worship. This is extraordinary because Cyrus was not a believer in the God of Israel. He was a pagan king, a ruler of a foreign empire, yet God had selected him to be an instrument of His will. Centuries before Cyrus's birth, the prophet Isaiah had named him as the one who would fulfill God's purpose in restoring Israel. In Isaiah 44 verse 28, God says, "Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure." Then in Isaiah 45 verse 1, God refers to Cyrus as His anointed. This is remarkable because anointed is a title usually reserved for kings of Israel. For God to use this title for a foreign ruler emphasizes His sovereignty, showing that He can work through anyone, even those outside of His covenant people, to fulfill His divine plans. This fulfillment of prophecy highlights how Persia's role was more than just that of a neighboring empire. In fact, Persia became the instrument of God's redemption for Israel, a nation chosen to carry out His purposes in the world. The significance of Cyrus's decree cannot be understated. Jeremiah had prophesied that the Babylonian captivity would last 70 years, and Cyrus's rise marked the end of that time. As the Israelites returned to Jerusalem, They began to rebuild the temple, an essential step in re-establishing Israel's religious and cultural life. Zerubbabel, a descendant of King David, led the rebuilding efforts with the blessing and support of Cyrus, fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah. The rebuilding of the temple not only marked the restoration of Israel but also served as a powerful reminder that God's plan is not limited by national boundaries or political rulers. God's choice to use Persia in this monumental way sent a message to Israel and the world: God's plans are unstoppable, and He can work through even the most unlikely figures to accomplish His will. But Persia's role in the Bible didn't end with Cyrus and the temple restoration. Another important story involving Persia takes place during the reign of King Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus in the Bible. The book of Esther recounts how Persia again became a crucial part of God's plan to protect His people. During Xerxes' rule, an official named Haman plotted to annihilate the Jewish people within the Persian Empire. Haman's deep-seated hatred led him to manipulate Xerxes into issuing a decree that would allow the Jews to be systematically exterminated. However, in a twist of divine intervention, a young Jewish woman named Esther had become the queen of Persia. Encouraged by her cousin Mordecai, Esther made the brave decision to approach the king and reveal her Jewish identity, risking her life to plead for her people's survival. Mordecai's words to Esther are some of the most well-known in the Bible. "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4 verse 14. Esther's intervention led to a dramatic reversal. When Xerxes learned of Haman's plot, he ordered Haman's execution, and a new decree was issued allowing the Jews to defend themselves. This act of courage and faith resulted in the survival of the Jewish people, and to this day, the story of Esther is celebrated annually during the Jewish festival of Purim. The story of Esther demonstrates another aspect of Persia's significance in the biblical narrative. Once again, God used Persia, a foreign empire, as a setting for the deliverance of His people. Despite being a pagan nation, Persia became an active participant in God's redemptive plan. Through Esther, Persia provided a stage for one of the Bible's most dramatic rescues, highlighting God's providential care for His people even when they were far from their homeland. This account not only shows the resilience of the Jewish people but also reveals how God's hand can work through even the most unlikely circumstances to bring about His purpose. In addition to its historical role, the Bible also places Persia in prophetic visions that look forward to the future. The book of Daniel, written during the Babylonian exile, includes several visions that reveal the rise and fall of world empires, including Persia. Daniel, a Jewish prophet serving in the courts of both Babylon and Persia, was given prophetic insight into the future of these empires. In Daniel 2, we find King Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a great statue made of different materials, each representing a different empire. The statue's silver chest and arms symbolize the Medo-Persian Empire, which would come to power after Babylon. Later in Daniel 7, the prophet has a vision of 4 beasts, each representing successive empires. The second beast, a bear raised up on one side, represents the Medo-Persian Empire. This imagery of the bear reflects the strength and dominance of the empire, emphasizing how Persia, together with the Medes, would become a powerful force that would reshape the ancient world. Daniel's visions make it clear that Persia's rise was not a random event but part of God's sovereign plan for the nations. By placing Persia within these prophetic visions, the Bible shows that the course of history is guided by God's hand, with each empire playing a role in the larger story of His people. In another vision recorded in Daniel 8, the prophet sees a ram with 2 horns representing the Medes and Persians. This ram charges in all directions, symbolizing the empire's rapid expansion. However, the vision also includes a goat with a prominent horn, representing Greece and its king, Alexander the Great, who would eventually conquer Persia. These visions emphasize Persia's place in God's timeline, showing that its rise and fall were all part of the divine plan. Though Persia would eventually give way to Greece, its role in restoring and preserving Israel was vital to fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Persia's legacy continued to shape the world long after its fall. By the time Jesus was born, the Persian Empire had been replaced by the Greek and Roman empires, yet its influence remained. Some scholars believe that the Magi, the wise men who visited Jesus in Bethlehem. Continuing from Persia's impact in the Bible's historical narrative, the biblical prophecies go even further, projecting Persia's presence into future global events. To understand this, we must delve deeper into the prophecies of Daniel and Ezekiel, two biblical figures who foretold events related to Persia and its surrounding nations, events that many scholars interpret as relevant even in today's geopolitical climate. These prophecies offer us a glimpse into how Persia, modern-day Iran, not only affected the course of ancient history but also continues to play a role in the unfolding of God's ultimate plan for humanity. Let's start with one of the most famous prophecies found in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a Jewish prophet, an advisor to the kings of both Babylon and Persia, received visions that spoke of future empires and key historical events that would shape the ancient world and beyond. In Daniel 2, we find the prophecy of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream about a giant statue, composed of different materials, each representing an empire. The head of gold symbolized Babylon, but the chest and arms of silver represented the Medo-Persian Empire, which would follow Babylon. This prophecy foretold the Medo-Persian Empire's rise to power and positioned it as the dominant force following Babylon's fall. This vision is further expanded in Daniel 7, where Daniel has a vision of 4 great beasts representing 4 kingdoms. The second beast, a bear, is understood to represent the Medo-Persian Empire, known for its massive, formidable military strength and aggressive expansion. The bear's raised side hints at the Persian dominance within the alliance between the Medes and Persians. This visual description is more than just a historical observation. It signifies Persia's importance in the ancient world and, by extension, in the biblical narrative as a tool used by God to set the stage for future events. Then we have Daniel 8, a vision involving a ram and a goat, where the ram with 2 horns represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The ram charges west, north, and south, symbolizing Persia's unstoppable expansion across those regions. However, a male goat with a single prominent horn, representing Greece and its ruler, Alexander the Great, confronts the ram, shattering its power and marking the beginning of the Hellenistic era. This vision reinforces Persia's role in God's timeline. Persia's dominance would give way to Greece, which would then influence the cultural and political landscape for centuries. This period eventually created the environment in which Christianity would spread during the Roman Empire. What's remarkable is that these prophetic visions didn't stop with Persia's historical empire. They also point towards future events in the last days, where Persia, now Iran, is still expected to have a pivotal role. One of the most compelling of these end times prophecies is found in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, which describe a powerful coalition led by Gog of Magog that will march against Israel in the latter years. Among the nations in this coalition is Persia, which aligns with modern Iran. The prophecy describes a vast invasion force made up of multiple nations, led by Gog, which will ultimately be defeated by divine intervention. Although the exact timing and nature of this battle are subjects of intense debate, the inclusion of Persia in this prophecy signals its continued importance in the biblical narrative. Many theologians interpret this prophecy as a description of an event yet to come, and it has fueled speculation about Iran's future role in the Middle East and its impact on Israel. In recent years, Iran's geopolitical stance and its complex relationship with Israel have drawn the attention of those studying biblical prophecy. Iran's alliances and ongoing tensions in the Middle East seem to mirror the alliances and conflicts depicted in Ezekiel's prophecy. While it's essential to approach these interpretations with caution, the parallels are difficult to ignore. Ezekiel's inclusion of Persia as a key player in end times prophecy underscores the notion that Iran is not just another nation but rather one that has a unique, God-ordained place in the prophetic timeline. Moving on, another profound example of Persia's significance in biblical prophecy is found in the way Persia symbolized God's sovereignty over nations. Daniel's visions remind us that every empire, no matter how powerful, rises and falls according to God's will. This theme is reinforced throughout the book of Daniel, where we see Daniel interpreting dreams and visions that demonstrate God's control over world events. In Daniel 4, we see God humbling King Nebuchadnezzar to show that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. This message is later echoed as the Persian Empire rises, showing that no nation, however mighty, is beyond the influence of God's plan. The prophetic role of Persia is not just about its historical might or future battles. It symbolizes a larger truth about God's control over nations. From the rise of Cyrus the Great to the prophecies about end-times battles, Persia's place in biblical prophecy demonstrates that God's plan encompasses the entire world, transcending human power and political boundaries. Through Persia, God shows that He can use any nation, even those outside of His covenant with Israel, to fulfill His purposes. This theme of God's sovereignty over nations is a cornerstone of biblical prophecy, and serves as a reminder that history unfolds according to His divine plan. This prophecy of Gog and Magog also invites us to consider the spiritual dimensions of these conflicts. Many biblical scholars believe that the final battle described in Ezekiel 38-39 is not just a geopolitical event, but also a spiritual confrontation, pitting forces that oppose God's people against God Himself. In this view, Persia's role in the end times is not merely about political alliances or military power. Instead, it represents a culmination of spiritual opposition against God's plan, a battle in which God will ultimately intervene to protect His people and assert His authority over the world. The visions of Daniel and Ezekiel provide us with a framework for understanding not only the historical significance of Persia but also its spiritual implications. By placing Persia at the center of these prophetic visions, the Bible highlights the nation's unique role in the unfolding of God's plan. Persia's involvement in these prophecies serves as a powerful reminder that the spiritual and physical realms are interconnected, and the events we witness in the world are often reflections of deeper, unseen battles. This connection between Persia and spiritual warfare is also seen in the Book of Esther, where God's providence overcomes the evil intentions of Haman, a high-ranking official in the Persian court who sought to destroy the Jewish people. Although Persia was a pagan nation, God used it to provide a stage for one of the most dramatic acts of divine intervention in the Bible. Esther's courage in approaching King Xerxes and exposing Haman's plot underscores the idea that God can use anyone, regardless of their background or nationality, to carry out His will. Esther's story is a powerful reminder that God's hand is at work in even the most unlikely circumstances, and it is celebrated annually by the Jewish people during the festival of Purim. In the story of Esther, we see how God's providence and protection extended to His people even while they were living in a foreign land under the rule of a foreign king. Although they were far from their homeland, the Jewish people found refuge within the Persian Empire, where they were protected by God through Esther's bravery and wisdom. This story is yet another example of how God used Persia as an instrument of His will, demonstrating His ability to work through any nation to protect His people and fulfill His promises. Even after Persia's fall to the Greeks under Alexander the Great, the influence of Persian culture, governance, and tolerance continued to impact the world, laying the groundwork for future empires. Persia's policies of religious tolerance, for example, allowed Jewish communities to thrive throughout the empire, preserving their traditions and preparing the way for the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire. The Persian Empire's openness to diverse cultures and religions created an environment that allowed Jewish teachings to flourish, setting the stage for the eventual spread of the gospel across the ancient world. The legacy of Persia's tolerance is also reflected in the New Testament, where we see the influence of Persian culture on the wise men, or magi, who visited the infant Jesus. Many scholars believe that these magi were from Persia and were likely Zoroastrian priests who practiced astrology and observed the stars. The story of the Magi highlights Persia's continued influence on the biblical narrative, even after its political power had faded. The Magi's journey to Bethlehem, guided by a star, reflects a deep spiritual significance, showing how Persia's wisdom traditions contributed to the recognition of Jesus as the Messiah. The fact that the Magi, possibly from Persia, were among the first to acknowledge Jesus' birth illustrates the lasting impact of Persian culture on the spiritual landscape of the ancient world. Even after the Persian Empire's decline, its legacy endured, influencing religious thought and adding another layer to Persia's role in the Bible. The Magi's journey to worship Jesus symbolizes a bridge between the Old and New Testaments, connecting the Persian legacy with the fulfillment of God's promise in the birth of Christ. Persia's contribution to biblical prophecy, history, the impact of Persia, both historically and prophetically, demonstrates a timeless truth: God's sovereignty over all nations and his ability to work through any people to accomplish his purposes. From the earliest pages of the Bible to the prophetic visions of the end times, Persia emerges as a complex and dynamic player, a nation that, while often outside Israel's covenant relationship, was continually instrumental in God's plan for his people and the world. In this part, we'll dive into the lasting spiritual lessons and implications for today, along with what Persia's role might reveal about God's unfolding plans for the future. The story of Persia, or modern-day Iran, is unique in that it doesn't fit neatly into the category of either a purely antagonistic or purely supportive nation of Israel. Unlike Egypt, which held Israel in bondage, or Babylon, which destroyed Jerusalem and exiled its people, Persia has a dual legacy. On one hand, it is remembered for Cyrus the Great, who liberated the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. On the other, Persia's alliances in Ezekiel's prophecies suggest a future conflict with Israel. This duality serves as a reminder that God's plan transcends the actions and identities of any single nation. He can use both allies and adversaries alike, and this interplay is a powerful illustration of divine sovereignty and purpose. As we have seen, Persia's role in the Bible extends beyond just a historical footnote. It underscores the principle that God's plans are bigger than any one group of people and that he is not bound by human conventions. The fact that God called Cyrus, a pagan king, his anointed, and used him to restore Israel points to an important biblical theme: God is willing to use anyone who is open to his guidance, regardless of their background, culture, or religious beliefs. This inclusivity highlights the idea that God's purposes are universal, reaching beyond ethnic, cultural, and even religious boundaries. In using Cyrus in Persia, God demonstrated that his power is not confined to the covenant people of Israel, but is accessible to anyone who seeks to fulfill his will. Persia's role in end times prophecy also provides crucial insights into God's perspective on world affairs. In Ezekiel's prophecy, Persia is listed as one of the nations that will join an alliance against Israel. This has led many scholars to speculate that modern Iran's stance on Israel and its influence in the Middle East could be part of a larger prophetic framework. Though the details and timing of this prophecy remain uncertain, it serves as a reminder that God is deeply involved in global events, guiding them according to his divine purposes. Moreover, this prophecy emphasizes a key point in biblical prophecy: God's plan includes both judgment and redemption. The alliance involving Persia in Ezekiel's prophecy ultimately faces divine intervention, underscoring that while God allows nations to rise and fall, he will ultimately judge those that oppose his people and his purposes. This dual theme of judgment and redemption is a core element of biblical prophecy and serves as a reminder that God's justice and mercy work in tandem. Just as he used Persia to deliver his people in the past, he can also bring about justice against those who oppose him in the future. One of the most intriguing aspects of Persia's role in the Bible is the presence of the Magi in the New Testament. Often referred to as wise men from the East, the Magi are believed to have come from the region once governed by the Persian Empire. Their journey to worship the newborn Jesus adds a unique dimension to Persia's biblical legacy. Even after Persia's fall to Greece and Rome, its cultural and religious influence persisted, and these Magi, likely familiar with ancient Persian wisdom traditions and possibly even Old Testament prophecies, recognized the significance of Jesus' birth. This story not only highlights the reach of Persian culture but also connects Persia's legacy with the fulfillment of messianic prophecy. The journey of the Magi reflects a powerful biblical theme: the recognition of God's purposes beyond Israel. The Magi's arrival shows that even those outside the covenant people of Israel can recognize and honor God's work. This aligns with the message that God's kingdom is inclusive, inviting all who seek him, regardless of their origin. The story of the Magi serves as a testament to Persia's continued impact on the spiritual landscape and reinforces the idea that God's influence knows no boundaries. Their journey to honor Jesus shows that Persia's connection to the Bible wasn't merely historical but also spiritual, bridging the gap between the Old and New Testaments. Reflecting on Persia's legacy in biblical prophecy and history, we find a nation that stands as a testament to God's redemptive power. From enabling the Jews' return to their homeland under Cyrus to influencing the culture and spiritual landscape of the ancient world, Persia was more than just another empire. It was a critical instrument in God's divine narrative. Its role in biblical prophecy reminds us that God's sovereignty extends to all nations, and that each one has a unique part to play in His plan. Persia's story also serves as a reminder of the enduring importance of Israel in God's plan. The connection between Persia and Israel, from the time of the exile to the prophecies of the end times, highlights Israel's central role in biblical prophecy and God's commitment to His promises. As we look at current events involving Iran, we can see the continued relevance of Persia's biblical legacy. The tensions and alliances in the Middle East, including Iran's influence in the region, serve as reminders of the biblical prophecies that include Persia. While we should approach such interpretations carefully, they invite us to view history and current events through a biblical lens, understanding that they may be part of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan. For believers, this means recognizing that the same God who orchestrated Persia's role in the past continues to guide the course of nations today. The story of Persia, as presented in the Bible, is one of divine purpose and spiritual significance. It is a reminder that God's plan encompasses all of history and that His purposes are often fulfilled through unexpected people and nations. Persia's role in biblical prophecy encourages us to trust in God's sovereignty over global events and to remember that even in times of uncertainty, His plan is unfolding. From the days of Cyrus to the Magi and the prophecies of Ezekiel, Persia's influence on the biblical narrative is a testament to God's ability to work through all nations to accomplish His will. In summary, the legacy of Persia in the Bible reveals a nation uniquely positioned in God's plan. Whether as a protector, a deliverer, or a future player in end-times prophecy, Persia's presence in the biblical narrative points to the larger truth that God is the ultimate ruler of history. As we witness the ongoing complexities of the Middle East, we can find assurance in knowing that God's hand is at work, guiding the nations toward His divine purpose. Thank you for exploring this incredible story with us. If you found this discussion enlightening and would like to continue diving into the profound connections between modern events and biblical prophecy, consider subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps us create more content like this and reach others eager to understand the Bible's relevance to today's world. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Together, let's continue this journey of discovery and spiritual growth.